If you're stuck in the middle of a triple feeding cycle, I don't really have to tell you how exhausting and unsustainable this is. In this video, we're going to talk about how to get out of the triple feeding cycle and get your life back. I work with clients pretty often that come to me stuck in a triple feeding cycle. I work exclusively with working moms who are trying to balance breastfeeding and work. So triple feeding is exhausting because you already have so much going on. So as you're watching this video, if you find that you're wanting some personalized help through this, there's an application down below to apply for our coaching program. Let's start with the definition of triple feeding, just so you know what it is. I found one from La Leche League Canada that I really liked. It said, it is a short-term plan to increase milk production while making sure that your baby is getting enough to eat. So in these scenarios, at every feeding, you are directly feeding from the breast. You are supplementing with express milk and or formula, any combination. So you're breastfeeding, you're bottle feeding, and then you're also pumping and hand expressing for the next feed. So the goal is to feed the baby at the breast, but for some reason they're not getting enough there. Maybe it's that they don't have good feeding skills. Maybe it's that you have low supply and we're trying to up that. So you're feeding at the breast, you're supplementing with a bottle, either breast milk or formula, and pumping. That's a lot of work. Now, that sounds crazy. Who would do that, right? And honestly, you end up with about 30 minutes in between until you have to do it all over again. So it is absolutely exhausting. There are some times when it's indicated though. So for example, a premature baby who's just starting feeding at the breast, maybe they're not quite ready to get full feeds from the breast because of their own skills. Little premature babies are little and they are still working on that. So while we're practicing at the breast, we're also supplementing and making sure that they're getting what they need, but you're also pumping to protect your milk supply so that you can maintain that long term for them. You can also have a baby maybe who was born late preterm or even full term who just has not developed the skills at the breast. Same kind of thing. For some reason, things are not going well and we're triple feeding. It could also be an older baby who is not gaining weight well or is starting to lose weight. That's a classic sign that feeding at the breast is not going well, either because of the baby's feeding skills or low supply or something like that. So triple feeding may be indicated to get them, again, we're trying to feed the baby while still letting them practice at the breast. That's the goal of triple feeding, right? Or not the goal, but the purpose of why we're doing that. You could also be doing this to try and boost your supply. So if you have low supply and the baby's well emptying you, but it's not enough milk, you're probably going to need to supplement them as well. Now we're supplementing them, so we need to make sure that we're asking for that increase supply as well by increasing the demand. So we're going to be pumping on top of that to try and increase the supply. So that's another reason you might be triple feeding. And then just to clarify, for example, if you're a working mom, because that's who I see the most, if you're breastfeeding, bottle feeding, and pumping, but not all at the same feed all the time, it's not really triple feeding. So like if you're breastfeeding the baby when you're home with them, then you're pumping and bottle feeding while you're away from them. That's not triple feeding, although you are doing all different kinds of feeding, but it's not all at the same feed every time or nearly every time. Does that make sense? Okay, so I have 3 sections of tips here for you. I have kind of my tips for triple feeding, and then we have some pumping tips for triple feeding, and then we have tips for getting baby back to the breast and doing well at the breast tip. So we kind of have like 3 sections here, all right? So first, how long should you be doing triple feeding? That's a great question. I read one blog that said up to 72 hours and then, you're done. And I think I laughed out loud because while I love that recommendation and like, yes, that is the goal, a short term, this is hard, right? So the shorter, the better. Mothers are doing this for months and months, to be honest. And that's usually where they come to me at is like, I've been triple feeding for a long time and I'm about to go insane. And yeah, it's exhausting. I read another blog mention this. It was so funny. She said, if I had to sum up my triple feeding experience in 3 words, they would be stressful, time consuming, and exhausting. And that's 100% triple feeding there for you. So my number 1 tip for surviving triple feeding is to have a plan to get out of triple feeding. Okay? Because if we're just doing this indefinitely and we don't know how to stop doing it, we are going to burn out so fast. This is absolutely exhausting. So we've got to come up with a plan on how to get out of that. What that looks like is figuring out why we're doing this in the first place. So what's the end goal and what's the problem that's causing us to do this? So for example, If it's low supply, then we need to be really focusing on well emptying the breast very frequently to get the supply up as much as we can. We also need to kind of monitor how much we're supplementing versus how much the baby's getting, which can be a little tricky. I recommend that you work with a professional to do that, because we can kind of get stuck in this cycle where we feed for 20 minutes, we give 2 ounces of breast milk after that, and we just do that all the time. But as things get better, we might need to be feeding them less. Does that make sense? But it can be easy just to do what you've always done. So have someone there to help you. If it's the baby's feeding skills, then you need to be working closely with an IBCLC and working on the baby's feeding skills and their latch techniques and how much they're able to transfer. And that's a great way to have some kind of plan to get out of triple feeding. So then you'd be using pumping to protect your supply while baby's practicing at the breast, but you need some help there, right? Let's start with some pumping tips for you. Okay, so number 1 tip for pumping during triple feeding is to pump efficiently. If you're going to be going through all the work of adding pumping to your life, make sure that you're doing it correctly. Okay, and there's a lot of YouTube videos on the channel here to help you figure out how to pump correctly. If you're looking for more of a step-by-step plan and some guidance through that, again, our coaching program is available and there's an application down below. But if you're not pumping correctly, I don't want to say it's wasted time, right? We're still doing it, but you're putting in so much work. I want to see you making sure that all the work you're putting in is really efficient. So if it were me, I'd be working with a lactation consultant to help breastfeeding skills, right? I'd be pumping really efficiently, because if I'm putting in time to do that, I want to make sure I'm getting everything out that I can in the shortest amount of time. That's what our goal is, right? And not wasting any energy in between. So another pumping tip for you is to set up your pump somewhere that it's easily accessible. Removing barriers to entry is going to be huge for you. And even if you get, short 5-minute pumping sessions throughout the day, if we're trying to increase supply or protect your supply, it can be really helpful and may help you from feeling like every time I sit down, I'm here for an hour because I'm feeding the baby and then I'm pumping and then I'm bottle feeding. That's a long time, right? So if you can set up the pump somewhere easily accessible and every time you walk by it, pump for one letdown, 5 to 7 minutes, and then, step away. Milk can sit at room temperature for 4 hours. So you can kind of just utilize, get creative in how you're making this work and making it sustainable for you for as long as you have to do it. Ooh, another good tip is to buy extra parts so you don't have to wash them each time. Another good tip is to have somebody else wash your pump parts for you. So what other caregivers are in your life? Triple feeding is crazy exhausting. So can they take over washing the parts for you? But also having enough parts to do multiple pumping sessions throughout the day can make it so that somebody only has to wash the parts at the end of the day. So that's a great way to make this more sustainable. Another tip is to use the milk from the previous pumping session for the current feeding session. And this eliminates some of the pressure that you have when you fed the baby and now you have to pump and then directly feed that milk. The baby is probably still hungry, right? So it can put a lot of pressure on you to pump quickly and a lot so you can get that milk and feed it to the baby, which makes pumping harder. One of the biggest barriers I see to mothers from pumping efficiently and getting all the milk out is stress and mental and emotional blocks, which seems funny. But once you get the logistics of pumping figured out, now we got to work on the inside of you and make sure that you're not getting in your way. It's really hard to get letdowns when your baby is sitting there crying at you because they're hungry. It's almost impossible. So try using the milk from the previous pumping session for the next feeding so that you can either feed the baby or have someone feed the baby while you pump and relax and be able to get the milk out that you need. Again, breast milk can sit out at room temperature per the CDC for up to 4 hours. So your baby's probably eating more frequently than that. So you could even have that breast milk at room temperature. You wouldn't even have to re-warm it up, right? But it's not that hard to re-warm breast milk that's been in the fridge for 2 hours either. So either way, try to lower your expectations, all right? This is really time consuming. So you will be able to do less in all aspects of your life. You're going to be adding in a lot of extra things. So lower the expectations of your life while we're in the middle of triple feeding. Don't be rigid with your pumping schedule. Now, it is really important to be pumping often and frequently, and well, but your baby needs you too. And it's okay to settle your upset baby if it pushes your pumping session back 20 minutes. You know what I mean? It is what it is and your baby needs you, and that's the most important thing. So try and find a good rhythm and flow If you're finding yourself constantly skipping pumping sessions, that's not going to be a good idea. If you're in a triple feeding cycle, it's only going to negatively impact you. But being super rigid can make your life absolutely miserable too. So we're trying to find a happy balance between frequent and efficient milk removal with a breast pump, right? And the baby, they're practicing at the breast, but also keeping your sanity and not burning out. It also doesn't have to be all or nothing. So you can supplement with formula as needed. So especially when we're dealing with a low supply problem and we're triple feeding, you can feel a lot of pressure to pump out everything that your baby needs, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Progress is still progress, right? So even if we're getting an extra half an ounce more than we did yesterday, that's great, right? But when we can supplement the rest with formula, formula is not bad, right? It saves babies' lives. We love feeding babies, but I think sometimes we get in the all or nothing mindset that it has to be all milk that I pumped, or I'm just going to give all formula. And that doesn't have to be that way. You can have a nice mixture of the two, whatever works for you, especially as you're working toward progress and being able to fully give your baby breast milk if that's what you're looking to do. And the last but most important pumping tip is to ask for help, right? You're doing a lot. You're lactating, you're feeding the baby, you're pumping. Some of those things only you can do. I get that. What else is on your plate, and how can you delegate that out? Either some paid help to come in and do, meal prep or cleaning or things like that. If you have a secondary caregiver or a partner, they can be washing bottles, they can be preparing the meals, getting you food, snacks, anything that you can get off your plate and give to someone else, you should. Mothers tend to want to do everything, but it's a really bad idea if you're also triple feeding. Okay, some tips for getting baby back to the breast. These are kind of fun. If you're triple feeding, I'm assuming that this is part of your goal because we're practicing feeding skills, we're protecting your milk supply with a pump, and we're feeding the baby, right? So number one here is you can offer supplements in a way that protects breastfeeding. So you don't have to feed with a bottle if you don't want to, especially with younger babies. Older babies can get a little bit more annoyed at this, but younger babies, you can do cup feeding, syringe feeding. There's a lot of different ways that you can feed a baby. But if you're going to use a bottle, which is probably the most common, make sure that we're doing paced feeding, or reactionary feeding is sometimes what I like to call that, where we're feeding with the bottle as closely to how the milk flows at the breast. This is really, really important. And it's really important to also tell and educate your other caregivers on, because you may not be the only one bottle feeding your baby. And if they're just used to like this milk to the face, like a lot of bottles do, and just, I can suck and it's there and I can chug all I want, they might become more frustrated at the breast because the breast doesn't function like that, So there are some ways that you can utilize a bottle to help it feel more like a breast, particularly in the flow. I mean, nipple and the type of bottle you're using are important, but the rate at which they're letting the baby have the milk can make a really big difference. You can experiment with offering supplementation before or after the feeding, kind of seeing what works better for you. So you can offer the breast first and then top off with a bottle at the end. You could also consider going back to the breast at the end after their bottle if the baby's willing. Again, more practice at the breast, good for your milk supply too. But you could also offer a bottle first, especially in a limited amount. This works really well if the baby is super hungry and really upset. They might be less willing to practice at the breast since the milk flow is not usually right there, and getting a letdown with a screaming fussy baby is a little tricky for you. So you could offer a small amount in a bottle first, so that to kind of calm them down and be like, you're gonna get milk, dude, chill. And then put them at the breast. You might have more success that way. So you can do a little experimenting either way and see what works better for your situation, for you, your baby. And it could even be different every time. You could also help the baby get more milk while they're nursing. So we teach hands-on pumping a lot with pumping, where we're adding in compressions to the breast or even some light pressure to help. But you can also do this while you're nursing. A little bit of compression or just guiding the milk downward and out can really help the baby get more milk at the breast. You can also switch sides multiple times to help keep the milk flowing for them. So you don't feel like you have to well empty this and then switch them over. You can go back and forth if you want, and just try and keep the baby happy at the breast based on, how things are flowing. Another back to breast tip for you is you can provide non-feeding opportunities at the breast. So sometimes we'll like to call these extra snacks. So in between feedings, if the baby wants to latch on and just have a snack, that's great practice, especially when they're not hungry and not ready for a full feeding. It can also take a lot of pressure off of you, right? Because you're just like, this one doesn't matter. This is just for fun, or they just want to suck. I'm just going to let them suck here because that's going to help us all in the end. And that can be a really relieving for mom. A lot of skin to skin sometimes I like to say with the milk farm open. So got the baby on their skin. If they wiggle down and suck a little bit here, lick around or suck a little, like whatever, really low pressure. We don't care what you're getting. This is just fun time at the breast that can make them more willing to be there during a feed and kind of just help you relax a little bit too. Keeping your baby near you during the night can also really help with this. And then limiting pacifier use as well. If we're using a pacifier to soothe the baby and we're in a triple feeding cycle, I would ask the questions, does the baby want to suck at the breast? Like we're trying to increase breastfeeding skills. So that would make more sense, right? So if you're using a pacifier with triple feeding, we just need to make sure we're doing that really intentionally and probably as little as possible because we're trying to get the baby to the breast, right? And then reducing supplementation gradually. So you can kind of reduce the amount you're supplementing as the breastfeeding skills get better and as your supply gets better, whatever you're working with here. You will want to get advice from an IBCLC or a pediatrician on the amounts that we need to be supplementing because they'll be monitoring your little one's growth, development. They'll have a bigger picture for you. You can also watch the wet diapers and bowel movements, right? What goes in must come out. So it's a great way to see how much is this baby getting? How are they doing? Hopefully you're having your baby weighed regularly. That would be important in triple feeding because something isn't right? So we'd want to make sure we were well monitoring the baby. All right. And then in this last section, I'd like to give you some of my tips for surviving triple feeding. This is a lot of what I'm working with my clients doing inside of our coaching program. A lot of them come to me this way, or sometimes they end up having to do this, in the middle of their journey because baby's not gaining weight well. And so here's some tips that I have for you to help make this more sustainable because the logistics are important and we've covered a lot of those so far, but there's a lot more to it than that. And I've already said this is overwhelming, exhausting, and unsustainable, right? So if you're going to do this, we got to figure out how to do this without it ending your journey or without you wanting to pull your hair out. Sometimes I have moms tell me that they had such a bad experience last time, whether it was triple feeding or whatever, that it affects their decisions to have another baby or affects their decisions whether or not to go back to work, to a career they really enjoyed and worked hard for. No, we got to figure out how to pump efficiently and make things work, not only to get milk out and to meet your feeding goals, to mother like you want to mother, but to do this and be happy about it, to make it sustainable, right? So here's a few of my tips for you. One, I've already said this, but it's really important. Ask for help with feeding, washing, all tasks that do not have to be done by you. Find help. And I know you're superwoman and I know you can do this and I know you're probably already doing it. You don't have to. You are not supposed to do this alone. So find logistical help to help you with this. And then also make sure that you have professionals in your corner to help you. You should have an IBCLC that you're working with for breastfeeding skills. They should be weighing your baby. Your pediatrician should be on board too, making sure that they were monitoring their growth and giving recommendations on how much supplementation we need and things like that. I think you should also have someone to help you with pumping and your mental health. And that's what we do inside of our coaching program. But you are not supposed to do this alone. So not only do you need physical, logistical help, you need some professionals in your back pocket to help you figure this out. If you're not sure which professional you need or would be most beneficial to you, you can comment below and I can help you try and figure that out, whether it's me or someone else. I am an IBCLC, but I'm not an IBCLC, if that makes sense. I'm more of a pumping expert and working mom coach. So all of my clients honestly have IBCLCs that they're working with in addition to what we're doing in our program. So let me know if you need help knowing, is this a pediatrician problem, an IBCLC problem, or a pumping problem, and we can kind of figure it out for you. It's also really important that you have clear goals and a way to measure them. Okay, this is not fluffy. This is important. So if we don't know why we're triple feeding or what the goal is at the end, or how do we know if we're moving toward that goal or succeeding, then we're really just doing a bunch of work and it feels terrible. We're doing the same things every day. It's a lot and exhausting and blah. So we have to have clear goals and clear ways to measure them. How do you know if we're getting closer to getting out of triple feeding or if things are going well? That's really, really important. Another tip I have for you is just to do your best. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And if you're here on this channel, I know you probably think similarly to me. It's always surprising the clients that choose to come and work with me. And I'm like, wow, we are really similar. But that's the beauty of YouTube, is you can get to know me and how I work and how I teach. And if you like that, we come and work with me. If you don't, then you find another YouTube channel that you resonate with more. So it's funny, if you're this far into this video, I know all or nothing thinking is probably a trap that you fall into often. It doesn't have to be that way, right? We don't have to do everything all in. It doesn't have to be all breast milk while we're in triple feeding. It doesn't have to be all perfect. We don't have to hit the schedule 100% every day. We really just need to do our best. And sometimes that's giving yourself a lot of grace or readjusting expectations so that the 80% is the new 100%. And now we can hit that more likely. Does that make sense? So I'm going to try and get, 6 to 7 pumping sessions in today, right? I really probably need 8 based on what we've worked with, but 6 or 7 is my goal. So when I hit that, great. And then if I can sneak in another one, then I feel really, really good about that. And now I'm having feelings of success and not feelings of failure because I only got 7. I was supposed to get 8. Do you see how I'm saying this? Like sometimes reframing what our goals are and what it means to be doing it all, to do our best, can make a really big difference. And then at the end of the day, sometimes we need to consider readjusting our goals, which I know probably isn't something you want to hear, but sometimes it takes someone asking you, what is most important to you right now? How important is keeping baby at the breast to you, especially if you've been doing this a long time? I know a lot of the moms I work with, feeding at the breast is pretty important, right? But at some point, especially when we work on fine-tuning pumping skills, sometimes pumping is so much easier, right? And so having a conversation with someone that you trust and who can give you realistic expectations and can kind of help you uncover what's most important to you. Is it feeding at the breast, or based on the situation that you've been handed right now and where you're at right now, is it breast milk? And is a pump helping you with that? And does this feel good moving forward? Can we take a break from breastfeeding and kind of switch to exclusively pumping for a little bit? Give you a break. Maybe the baby will come back. Maybe they won't. But how important is that to you? What do you want long term? Based on where you're at right now, what feels the best moving forward? But having someone being able to ask these questions with you is really important, because sometimes we have to readjust our goals, and sometimes you're handed a really crappy situation and you do your best and you do everything right. And at some point we have to make decisions about our mental health and our enjoyment in life and our enjoyment with our baby. It can be really easy to get frustrated and have negative feelings towards your baby, which some of those are normal, they just happen. But if it's consistent and it's affecting your relationship, then we need to readjust some things on how we're feeding. Again, it doesn't really matter to me how you feed your baby. I really want you to feel in control. I want you to have choices. I can't guarantee it's going to be perfect. Nobody can, right? But I want you to feel like I know enough. Things are working how they're expected, and I'm going to make a conscious, informed decision on what I want to do moving forward. That kind of control, doing things on your own terms, can be the difference between looking back on this experience in a positive way versus looking back on it with some really negative and sometimes traumatic feelings. So if you need any help with that, let me know. This is exactly what I do in our coaching program. Again, there's an application down below, but I hope you found some really practical tips in this video to help you if you are in a triple feeding cycle. My fingers are crossed that you can get out of this as soon as possible for you. Again, that's the number one goal of triple feeding, is to get out of triple feeding as soon as possible. It's exhausting. If you need some help, let me know, but good luck and happy pumping.